a builder. Everything that exists has a builder. Hebrews 11 verse 3 says, by faith we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that were visible. Did that come out right? Everything that was created by God. Let me say this again. I always get this confused. What is seen was not made out of things that are visible. In other words, God made things out of things that didn't exist. That's the easy way of saying it. Only God can create something out of nothing. That's where I wanted to get to. Only God can create something out of nothing. Although I've known some individuals that have created things out of nothing sometimes, turned a mountain out of a molehill kind of thing. But God is the only one that can create something out of nothing. Genesis 1 begins by saying, and God said. And then we get this fantastic world created for us just because God said. There was nothing to create the world out of. He created the world out of nothing. And he did it simply by the power of his word. And I think it's a key thought in Scripture. Trish can get me to do things simply by the power of her word, but she's the only one that can do that. Psalms 33 is a beautiful psalm. I discovered this one not too long ago. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. And it goes on. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth, all their host. So it's telling us God created the world simply by his word. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap. He puts the deeps in storehouse. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. That's what we're supposed to do when we see the creation of God. Stand in awe of God. And we've had those breathtaking moments where we've seen sunsets, where we've seen perhaps a glorious physical scene because you're in the mountains somewhere or something like that. And sometimes we just kind of stand in awe of what we see. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and he stood firm. So we're getting the message of a pretty powerful God here, aren't we? Wrong button. So each day, take note of the world that you live in and stand in awe of it. And that's a good practice. Go through a week where every day you look for something in creation that reminds you of God. The psalm goes on. The Lord looks down from heaven and he sees the children of men. From where he sits enthroned, he looks out on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashioned the hearts of them and all, and observes all their deeds. So God is looking on his creation. He's watching everything that we do. He says the king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is false hope for salvation, and by its great might it cannot rescue. Translate that into today's language. Bombs and all those guns and weapons, they're not really the ones that's in control. And certainly I think we're hoping and believing that God is in control of the world today with all the crises that seem to be popping up all around. So we learned to trust in God. I think this spells providence. All this chapter is about providence. He made the whole world, and God is in charge of that world. I really like the last two verses of the psalm as it ends. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love. And I think he's talking about us, people of faith, Christians, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine. So I thought about that last verse. I focused on the word, he keeps them alive in famine. What the verse doesn't say is that there's going to be no problems here on earth. But what it does say, providentially, I think, that even during the problems, whatever problems may be, a famine, a war, whatever, he can providentially watch over those that put their faith and love in him. Why is creation a day that we'll never forget? Another subtle reminder of creation is marriage. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. Genesis 1:26 is part of the creation where he says, let us make man in our own image. Male and female, he made them. So we get more detail as we go into Genesis chapter 2. It is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him. And then he tells us that God took the rib from man and he formed a woman. And biblically, this whole message is telling us about the beginning of marriage. I would like to have a picture of Adam and Eve, I want to see the perfect man and the perfect woman in the beginning. I think that would be kind of neat. Nobody thinks like I do, huh? Okay. And then another subtle reminder about creation and marriage is, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That basically is the biblical definition of what marriage is all about. We read on in the New Testament about marriage. Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What God has joined together, let not man separate it. So all that began during the creation. So it's a reminder to us that marriage is something that God created. So when you kiss your wife or your mate, it should remind you of a day that you will never forget. I'm looking to see how many smiling faces we have out there. Maybe we should pause for a moment to have a kiss. Don't forget your anniversary. So we're talking about days that you don't forget. Don't forget your anniversary. And I should do a test here to see how many of you get it right, but I guess I won't go to that extent. How many of you have ever forgotten your anniversary? You're too ashamed to raise your hand, aren't you? Oh, yes. Say that again. You forgot? Sometimes. Yeah, I would probably never confess that to an audience of this size, and probably she will never let you forget again the day that you were married. Oh, well, I thought I'd just have... How many years has it been? 50 years? Oh, wow. Cool. Oh, next month. You're not there yet. We have our 50th coming up this year, too. What day is that? I forget. Some things you can't forget, yeah. But marriage began in the very beginning with God. So another reason to remember the creation of God. The world, nature, reminds you that God created the world. Creation reminds you of the power of God, the power simply in his word. Marriage reminds you of the day that you should never forget. So never, ever forget your anniversary. All right. Creation reminds us of another thing, a day of rest. A part of creation event was the creation of the Sabbath day. Can I say it that way? What does Sabbath mean? The word Sabbath. Rest? That's right. It means to rest because God rested on the seventh day. The heavens and earth were finished and all the hosts of them, and on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done. So not only was it a day of rest, but it was a day that God made holy. Okay, obviously we're talking about the Sabbath day here, becoming a day that we should not ever forget. Okay, now realize that Sunday is the day that we usually honor today, and it's not the same as the Sabbath. The Sabbath was the seventh day, which is Saturday, even for us today. But I think there's clues as to how we should regard Sundays. Sunday has become a day of worship for Christians today. Acts 20 verse 7 is our example of church meeting on the first day of the week. What did they do on the first day of the week in Acts 20? Do what? They gathered together to break bread, which most scholars recognize is an idiom for partaking of the Lord's Supper. So they came together on the first day of the week to partake of the Lord's Supper. So that's why we are here this morning, to partake of the Lord's Supper. 1 Corinthians 16 reminds us that also the first day of the week was set aside as a time for giving. And so most of us do plan our giving, and we give on the first day of the week. Some of you do it every first day of the week. Some of you do it every payday, which is every other week, or sometimes, anybody get paid by the month anymore? You do? Oh, Social Security. Yeah, us Social Security people get paid by the month. Yeah, I forgot about that. I guess we do too, in a sense, get paid by the month. Why Sunday for us as Christians? Why did God go from Saturday to Sunday? Well, some hints in the Bible as to why we do it on Sunday. Jesus was raised on what day? Say Sunday. Okay, you can play along with me. First day of the week. He died on Friday, was buried in the tomb on Saturday, and he rose Sunday morning. So it's one of the ways that we honor his resurrection. The church was started on what day? Take a guess. Sunday. As far as we can figure it out, it was probably a Sunday. That's because it started on the day of Pentecost. What does Pentecost mean? What does Pentagon mean? 50. Yeah, it's a 50. So if Jesus rose on Sunday, that would be day number 1. You count 49 more days, it comes out to be on a Sunday. So we're fairly sure the church began or started on Sunday. Did everyone understand my math there? 49 plus 1. I'm just going to tell you to trust me on that one. So Everett Ferguson, in his book on the early church, says that probably, all probability, it was a Sunday that they started on. The Lord's Day seems to refer to Sunday in the Bible. Ferguson said that there are two things that are the Lord's Day and the Lord's Supper. And so the Lord's Day seemed to be a reference to Sunday. A day of rest was built into the purpose of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a day designed to focus on spiritual things. The Lord blessed the day and made it holy. So in a sense, it's kind of a special day, a holy day. It was important to observe the Sabbath day. How important was it for Jews to celebrate to observe the Sabbath day? You're supposed to say very important, right? I'll give you a multiple choice. A verse that I've always liked in the Old Testament is Exodus 34 and verse 21 that talks about the Sabbath day. It says, 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest time you shall rest. What I like about that verse is the explanation. In plowing time and harvest time you shall rest. What was the busiest time of year for Israelites, generally speaking? Well, it'd be harvest time and planting time, right? When they planted, if they didn't plant their food, it wouldn't grow. If they planted the food and it grew and they didn't harvest it, they wouldn't eat. So, two very important times for the Jews in the first century: harvest time and planting. A modern day translation would be something like, even in the most busiest time of your life, you shall rest. So it says, no matter how busy we get, we should observe a day of worship to God. Has life ever been so busy for you guys that you could not worship on Sunday? Think about that. Serious question, isn't it? Again, I think it's kind of important for us to at least think about our purpose on Sunday. Nehemiah has a great lesson on the Sabbath day. Remember, Israel had been carried into captivity. They stayed in captivity for 70 years. And finally, Nehemiah leads the way back to Jerusalem. He helps rebuild the city of Jerusalem, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And that was finished. And when you get to Nehemiah chapter 7, verse 1, it says the job was done. Ezra returns after Nehemiah, and he leads a revival in worship. And that begins really in Nehemiah chapter 8. So Nehemiah rebuilt the city. Ezra comes back and he restarts worship after that 70 years of captivity. Ezra assembles the people and he reads the law. It says to men, to women, and to children. So to kick things off, he has kind of a big prayer session. The law is read to all the people and read so that they could hear it. And what I really like about that verse in Ezra is it says, children who could hear and understand. So who gathered to hear the law read that day? Everybody that could hear and understand. I like that verse because I think to me it talks about baptizing babies. They have to be able to hear and understand. Verse 8 says, leaders help them understand the law clearly. So not only was Ezra reading the law, but they had people out in the audience making sure that they understood it clearly. So if you had a question, probably they could raise their hand and ask a question and get an explanation to make them understand it clearly. And then the Feast of Tabernacles was observed for the first time in many, many years. So that's just a neat kind of verse to me. Nehemiah chapter 10, the people made a promise not to marry anybody in the land. Now, during the days that after the captivity, people began to marry some in the land, married those who were Gentiles and idol worshipers. And then it says, if the people promised, if the peoples of the land bring in goods or any grain on the Sabbath day to sell, the people promised, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath day or on any holy day. So this is a revival of their faith, a revival of their worship. And they promised that they would not marry the people and they would not buy grain that was brought in on the Sabbath day. So after getting those promises, Nehemiah goes back to Susa, the capital. And then he comes back later for a second time, and we continue to read in Nehemiah. On returning in chapter 13, he saw men treading out the wine presses on the Sabbath day. So what they were doing was they were working on the Sabbath day. And he saw goods brought in on the Sabbath day for trade. So they made promises that they wouldn't do it, but then they started doing it again. Nehemiah 13 verse 19 says, as soon as it began to grow dark at the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I commanded the doors should be shut and gave orders that they should not be opened until after the Sabbath day. So when he got back for the second visit and saw what was going on, he put an end to it. He closed the gates to the city so the people could not come in. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates that no load might be brought in on the Sabbath day. So he was making them stand by the word. But it gets more interesting. When you get out of the habit of doing something, it's hard sometimes to get back into the habit. And obviously it was for the people then. And then he goes on in verse 20 and 21. Then the merchants and the sellers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. But I warned them and said, why do you lodge outside the wall? If you do it again, I'll lay my hands on you. Time on, did not come to sell their goods on the Sabbath day. So he put an end to it. And that's kind of a neat way to read it. When you get out of the habit of doing something, it's hard to do the habit of doing things. Isaiah 58 verse 13. More about the Sabbath. If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath and the holy day of the Lord honorable, and call the Sabbath a delight and a holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord. So Isaiah is saying the day should not be used for anything other than worship, really. I like the English, easy to read translation of this verse. This makes it a little bit more plainer to us. This will happen when you stop sinning against God's law about the Sabbath day. When you stop doing things to please yourself on that special day, you shall call the Sabbath a happy day. You should honor the Lord's special day by not saying and doing things that you do every other day of the week. Then you could enjoy the Lord. So that's kind of a powerful message for us today, right? Have we turned Sunday into a day of pleasure when we do all other things? Now, I know this is about the Sabbath day and not Sunday. I know the Sunday is not the Sabbath. I know Old Testament rules do not apply to us today. We're just kind of looking for some ideas and principles about how we can maybe strengthen our relationship with God. Any comments or any questions? Anything we should talk further about? Kind of in retrospect, Sunday just become another day of the week in which we do the things that we do on other days of the week? Has it become a day of pleasure rather than focusing on things that are spiritual? This will happen when you, or the things that we do, are the things that we can do that change our lives? Are there things that we can do that will change our lives? In other words, are there things that we can do to make Sunday a very special day for us? Just some thoughts, some ideas. I think that, again, in principle, some of these things do apply to us. Also thinking about creation. I thought about God walking Job through creation. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And this is when it begins to confront Job about the experience that he just had. We're talking about doing the book of Job sometime this fall. Scott is going, I don't know, I agree with you. Scott's going to take over Sunday after we're done. He's going to do a study on the book of Ephesians. And after that, we're planning on doing this summer thing that we do a lot, where we get men of the congregation to prepare a lesson. And we take 13 weeks, and we have them present lessons on Sunday morning. We did that last year, and we had I think 18 volunteers to do 13 weeks. So we had to figure it out, who we get to teach and who we not get to teach. But we're planning on doing that again this summer. Then I'm planning on doing a study of the book of Job after that, which I have not really started yet. Just beginning to look at ideas on how to do the book of Job. But I think it's a significant book, and it talks about the way we see things in the world today. So that's kind of where we're going to be going for the rest of the year. If you have anything that you would like to study, always welcome to suggestions. Not that we promise that we can do it, but at least we try to make everybody happy. Is everybody happy? Okay. Romans 1 verse 19 says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power, divine glory, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world." So I think this is why creation is an event that we will never forget. I think I've run out of stuff to say. Anybody want to make any comments? So your assignment is to take a couple of days each week and just look at creation. Find things that happened at a full moon or stars, a clear night. Those of you that live out in the country can probably see many, many more stars than what those of us who live in the city. Experience a comet, experience something wonderful. Enjoy creation. Okay, we're all done. No comments? You're a quiet group this morning. We missed the guy running around with the mic trying to catch up, but